Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel Radiant Marble with Nikita. Today we will discuss about the CBSE Class 12th English lesson from the NCERT textbook Flamingo, which is titled The Last Lesson by Alphonse Daudet. Before we begin, don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe to our channel, and most importantly, click the bell icon so that you do not miss on any updates from our channel. So let's begin. This chapter, the last lesson, is actually set up in the backdrop of the Franco-Prussian War. So it is important to understand this first. In the 1870s, Prussia, which was a German state, had taken over France. They had a war with France and France lost. As a result of this, the Prussians started to impose their German culture, language and traditions over the French people. Whereas Prussia does not exist today, we can observe that it does contain modern-day parts of Germany, Poland and Russia. So, this entire chapter is based on the backdrop of this war. It basically covers the German people or the Prussian people trying to impose their German culture and most importantly their German language over the French students and the French people. This chapter revolves around two primary characters. First is a young boy, a young student named as Franz, and the other is his French teacher M. Hamel or Mr. Hamel. So the story starts on a regular day, a regular morning. Franz wakes up and he is getting late for school. On his way to school, he is reminded of this idea, reminded of this thing that his French teacher had asked in the class the other day, that he would be asking students about participles. Now this idea made Franz feel very uncomfortable and he even thought of bunking his class. But still somehow he managed to walk through his way. Throughout his way, he observed everything possible. So basically there is description about birds chirping and Prussian soldiers having their drills. Basically all in all everything. Franz felt so distracted. He seemed to be a student who was absolutely careless, or if not careless, but not very concerned about his studies. He was not very concerned about French language in general. He had a very easygoing approach towards studies. And even though he was getting late for school, he did not seem to have that nudge to run towards his school, and he was taking his own sweet time. As he was walking, he observed that there was a bulletin board. He walked close to the bulletin board and he observed that there was yet another notice about the French people losing the war. Remember that I just told you about the Franco-Prussian War, which forms the backdrop of this entire lesson. So there was yet another notice about the French people losing the war. He looked at it with utter dismay, yet it felt something which was very usual and very common by that time. He kept on walking and soon he approached his school. As he approached his school, something very different happened. He was expecting his school to be full of commotion, hustle, bustle, full of students in their jovial mood and having lot of loud noises, lot of chaos all around the place. However, nothing like that really happened. Everything seemed to be very still, and this actually surprised Franz a lot. Franz somehow thought that he should ignore that, and he went and simply went to his classroom. In his class, what happened was even more strange. While he was expecting his French teacher, Mr. Hamel, to be very strict, very stern, and actually end up scolding Franz for getting late to the class, nothing of that sort ever happened. He was actually very, very subtle and gentle, and in his kindest tone, asked Franz to go and occupy his desk. Mr. Hamel even told Franz that if he had not arrived a bit earlier, he would have begun with his lecture. Franz felt very confused, yet he went on and occupied his desk. He looked all around and he observed everybody, including Mr. Hamel, who seemed to be dressed in his best attire today. Franz observed that Mr. Hamel was wearing a beautiful green coat. He was wearing a frilled shirt and a little black silk cap. Now this was an attire that Mr. Hamel used to wear only on special occasions such as prize-giving days. What was even more strange does not end here, and the list goes on. Franz even observed that the back benches, which usually used to be empty, were now all occupied by villagers. There was a postman, there was a former mayor, all who had occupied the past last benches. This felt very eerie, very unusual and very different. Strange is perhaps a very limited word to explain what Franz was feeling. Franz was looking everywhere. Suddenly, Mr. Hamel started to speak in the class. He went on to say the most shocking words. He said, "My children, this is the last lesson I shall give you. Actually, an order had come from Berlin which instructed the schools to stop teaching French and instead start teaching German. A new system had taken over, new administration had come, and a new teacher who would teach them German would join the school the next day and the students would start learning German. All of this felt like a huge shock. The sky seemed to have fallen on the head of Franz. Just imagine a boy who few minutes back did not even care or bother to run to school when he was getting late and even thought of bunking his class was now met with the most surprising announcement that any teacher could ever make. Just imagine a student getting to know that that particular class would be his last lecture for his own language, that was French, and that French was about to get replaced by a foreign language, and that was German. Franz felt all this while the books that he used to criticize so much were actually his most prized possessions. The books, which felt like a huge weight on his shoulders, now seemed to be so prized and so valuable. He used to hate cramming history and grammar and everything about saints and all the knowledge and information, but now everything seemed to have a meaning and a huge utility. He was even getting disturbed by this idea that from now on he would not meet his cranky teacher who he felt was a cranky person, Mr. Hamill. He was absolutely disturbed by the idea that that particular class would be his last interaction with his teacher, Mr. Hamill, and more than that, that particular class was the last opportunity where he could learn his own language, French. Every observation and everything which he earlier found to be strange was making complete sense. He could now understand why the villagers who were never anywhere to be found near the school had occupied the last benches. They had all come as a matter and as a mark of respect to the teacher of French, to their teacher, Mr. Hamill, who had given his faithful service to the school in 40 years. And while Franz was trying to process everything that had just happened, Mr. Hamill called out his name to recite the participles. Franz felt very dreaded. He did not know what to say. What if he end up making a mistake? What if things are not perfect? And what if he makes a huge blunder? All of these thoughts were coming to his mind, and just then Mr. Hamill spoke. He asked Franz not to worry, and rather comforted Franz. This was something very unusual of Mr. Hamill. Mr. Hamill, who had the perception of being very strict and stern amongst his students and even perhaps punishing the students, this time seemed to adopt a very different yet a gentle approach. Mr. Hamill comforted Franz and told him not to worry in case he messed up, and rather he went on to say that this idea of we have got enough time and this habit of procrastination, the idea that there is a tomorrow where we can practice and we can learn, is the fundamental cause why Franz and maybe other students like Franz have not yet learned the basics of French, which were participles. Mr. Franz went on to adopt a patriotic tone. He went on to question as to how can Franz actually claim to be a Frenchman when he cannot even read or write his basic language. He also went on to analyze the role of parents as to why students like Franz cannot even read or write their very own language, which was French. He thought that parents used to send their children to do some work just to earn some extra money. He also went to question his own role as a teacher, and he went on to critically analyze his own work as a teacher as to why he could not make his own students learn the basics of the language. He went on to explain the fact and also feel very repentful and regretful of the idea that he used to give holidays, frequent holidays to the students, and he used to even send Franz to water his flowers. All of that felt like a huge sense of reclamation, that felt like a huge sense of analyzing where all things went wrong and why students could not even do the basics of French. While everything seemed to be quite gloomy and dull as well as sad, Mr. Hamill now decided to motivate the students. He thought of an optimistic angle. He wanted to explain the importance of language to his students, so he went on to say that in situations where people are enslaved, language is actually the most important tool, or it is the key which leads to people to reclaim their own freedom. What he wanted to tell and explain the students was that if they learn their own language and take pride in their own culture, they will find the key to freedom under the Prussian rule. Mr. Hamill now started with a lesson in grammar. Everything seemed to be explained very easily. Mr. Hamill, now very cautious of his approach as a teacher, did not want to leave any stone unturned to deliver his lessons excellently. He had and he imposed all his will and might to make sure that the students understand the lecture in grammar properly. Franz enjoyed that lecture. He actually understood every single thing that was taught, and he wondered to himself if really French was that difficult as he thought earlier. When he was paying attention, everything seemed to be quite crystal clear. Just then, Franz wondered to himself, looking at the pigeons sitting on top of the ceiling. He wondered if the Prussians will impose the German language on the pigeons and make them co German as well. All of this expression just highlights about how rigidly the Prussians had imposed German language and German culture as well as traditions on the French people. All the students continued studying with their best, and as the clock struck 12, the trumpets blew and the class was called off. It was a very emotional and a sentimental moment for Mr. Hamill. He could not gather or muster the courage to speak anything because he was stirred and completely consumed by his emotions at that point. However, he did gather the courage to write boldly on the board, and he wrote Vive la France, which means Long live France or Hooray France, and with that the school was dismissed. Now we come towards the end of the story, the last lesson. The last lesson heavily comprises of the themes of the importance of learning one's own language and to take pride in one's own culture. Secondly, it also revolves around the beautiful relationship between a teacher and a student and how a teacher plays a very critical role in shaping the life of a student. Thirdly, it also covers the important aspect that we should not wait for tomorrow to do anything. Tomorrow is really not guaranteed, and it is important that we take actions today itself. Franz throughout used to procrastinate about learning French, and the day he thought that he would be serious was actually the day that ended up being the last day when he would actually be able to learn French, because after that the entire regime was to change. With this, we come towards the end of this video. If you have any questions or queries, you can drop them in the comment section below and I will respond to them. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe to our channel.